This is the World Organic News podcast for the week ending 22nd of February 2016. John Moore reporting. This week the focus is on changes. Mark Jacobs from the blog Mark Jacobs Lives has a story about a tree that produces 40 different types of fruit. They are all stone fruit in this example, peaches, plums, etc. The same principle can be applied to pome fruit, apples, pears, quinces. And I'm sure citrus too. It is just not possible to graft lemons onto an almond tree. Many fruits from one tree is a perfect idea for small spaces. The principal tree needs to be pruned fairly heavily each year, as the roots and trunk tend to favour their own kind, but it is doable. There's a link in the show notes. This is the sort of creative change that produces more food and a greater variety of that food. A little similar to interplanting in a field to increase biodiversity, habitat, or predatory insects and companion planting. All these ideas are tried and tested. The other sort of change being foisted upon us is a little different. To be honest, completely different. I'm talking about glyphosate-based GMO production. The blog, A Sweet Dose of Reality, reports that the US's FDA is finally going to test for glyphosate levels in food. I'd have thought this would have been done at the product safety testing stage before glyphosate was released for general use. That probably just shows my naivety. After all, Monsanto said the product was safe for human consumption and it was biodegradable. Why would we question the word of a company that gave us Agent Orange, PCBs and aspartame? I am so naive. This led to my next question on change. Two areas in particular. Let's start with the Zika virus. The blog, Schatzi's Earth Project, reports that the Zika virus has been known about and documented since the 1950s. Yet it is only within the last 12 months or so it has been implicated in birth defects. So what changed? There are reports of genetically modified mosquitoes being released in the regions of Brazil with both Zika and birth defects. There are also reports that a new larvicide is being used in the area to target the larval stages of the mosquito's life cycle. The link is in the show notes. So who's to know the cause? I'll leave it to those in the field. What does intrigue me is the sudden change in the effects of the virus. Has it mutated, or is there some other explanation? The second area of change in my mind this week is the whole gluten intolerance thing. For 10,000 years or so, wheat-related cereals like, wheat, as well as rye, barley and spelt, have formed a considerable part of the diet for a large slab of humanity. Celiac disease has been with us during that time, but why then has the incidence of gluten intolerance and indeed gluten allergy increased in the past decade? Why? What has changed in the production process during this time? Surely not a huge increase in the use of glyphosate. Surely not the creation of starchier, low-protein wheat varieties suited to the mass production of white, fluffy, air-filled breads. Maybe they both have had an effect. Another explanation could be an evolutionary one. In the same way changes occurred in human populations to allow adults to consume dairy products, are we now undergoing a similar change except in reverse? An intolerance arising in the population. I can see absolutely no reproductive advantage to this, so why is it becoming established in the population? And with that question, I will leave this subject. If you have any thoughts, please feel free to email me at john@worldorganicnews.com. Now to our ongoing series on those who have had an impact on the organic world. Last week, I covered the first section of John Seymour's seminal work, The Complete Book of Self-Sufficiency. This week we move on to the actual processes of food production. Seymour breaks food production into 4 sections, as we said last week. Food from the fields, food from animals, food from the garden, and food from the wild. Food from the fields covers the processes to convert forests into fields, a process millennia old across northern Europe. It is worth remembering this book was first published in 1976. A time when we did not fully understand the importance of forests. Equally, Seymour's methods are to use hand tools and horses, so it is done relatively gently. Do not imagine the Amazonian wastelands. Indeed, he suggests acquiring already cleared land, but covers the whole process for clarity. Now, to a boy growing up in this wide brown land, a land of droughts and flooding rains, the section on drainage was particularly intriguing. The idea of not valuing, containing, and lovingly maintaining a spring, but instead draining it and sending the water into streams and rivers, was, and to some extent still is, a difficult concept for me to entertain. As stated, this book is rooted in the temperate regions of Western Europe. The sections on fencing, and particularly hedging, fill my head with wonder. Having done some fencing, it is satisfying, yet very hard work. The remnants of hedging attempts by the first white settlers here in Australia can be seen in isolated hawthorn trees spread across grazing land in the ranges. Wire one and the hedging idea for stock control did not take root here. Once fenced and drained, Seymour's fields are ready for cultivation. Horse, tractor or pig, he asks. He prefers pigs, followed by a horse-drawn harrow. Interestingly, at this time, information on a no-plough system was being published in Japan. The One-Straw Revolution by Masanobu Fukuoka. Fukuoka will be the subject of one of these People of the Organic Way series. Just as strangely, his book too was in the Eastwood Library collection, as was Mao's Handbook on Guerrilla Warfare, but that's another podcast altogether. Seymour then covers traditional harvesting methods from sickle to scythe. A few pages on each of the main cereals, their uses and growing requirements follows. Overall, I think this section is well worth a detailed study. I didn't memorise it, but I came close. Ideas, dreams and aspirations were kindled by the words, the images and my own inclinations. Next week we'll look into my favourite section of the book, Food from Animals. Any questions, feedback or criticisms are most welcome. Email me at john@worldorganicnews.com. That's John, Jon, no H. A transcript of each episode is available on the blog at worldorganicnews.com under the tab Podcasts. Sounds used in this podcast are courtesy of Texas Radio Theatre Company on the Freesound site. Links are in the show notes. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back again in a week.